Hello, and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Lanell Lenzkes is a former principal at Foothills Christian Middle School, located near San Diego, California. Lanell Lenzkes is married to her high school sweetheart, Dr. Brian Lenzkes, who we recently interviewed on our podcast. Lanell's life and career changed drastically when her husband walked away from a financially successful position in a medical practice in order to fulfill a greater purpose by helping patients regain their health and reverse obesity and chronic disease. Dr. Brian Lenzkes is one of the most beloved and well-respected doctors and experts in the low-carbohydrate community. Dr. Lenzkes also hosts the Life's Best Medicine podcast and co-hosts the popular LowCarbMD podcast, both of which Lanell and I have been absolutely honored to be hosted on. I met Lanell for the first time at the 2024 Symposium for Metabolic Health in San Diego. We had a lovely conversation about her journey with her husband into the unknown, as Dr. Brian Lenzkes began his independent membership-based practices, first in San Diego under the practice Metabolic Health and Direct Primary Care San Diego, and more recently in Arizona under the practice Arizona Metabolic Health. Lanell Lenzkes, what an absolute honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thank you, Casey.
How did I do on the introduction?
You did great. I was like, oh, he's making me sound really good.
Yeah, I had to do some digging. There's not much about you out there. So looking up your former school.
Yeah, I am not out there. So I was like, what if he asks me, how can people get a hold of you? They can't. I live a really exciting, boring life.
I am very jealous. That's awesome to be like totally off the grid and not be able to be contacted. I'm very jealous about that. And I don't know if you've ever Googled Foothills Christian Middle School. There's a few. Like you have to kind of narrow down to try to find the actual school that you were at. I had no idea.
Yep. San Diego Middle School.
Yeah, nice.
One of the best things I ever did. Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It looked like an amazing school. How long were you the principal there?
So the principal for 7 years. But our girls, we have 2 daughters and they're 26 and 23 now, but they started there in kindergarten. So I was always a part of volunteering or being part of administration or whatever, super involved for about 19 years. And then they needed to have a new principal, and they asked if I was interested.
Wow.
And I was like, absolutely not. Well, will you think about it? Will you pray about it? Okay. And then I just knew, once I did that, I knew I was supposed to take the job. And I am so grateful. Like one of the best things I've ever done is I love middle school too. Those kids are very, very special. So,
oh my goodness. I remember what I was like in middle school, and I would not like to be my principal in middle school. I'll just say that.
So. You were probably one of my favorite type.
Oh no.
I love those kiddos that are a little bit harder or challenging.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. Well, it takes a special person to do something like that. And I remember when I was in preschool, my mom was part of like a Catholic church preschool, even though we were brought up Mormon. But she was teaching at this preschool, and I remember her being there, and I thought it was pretty cool. She didn't like teach anything after that. But do you feel like your daughters got more attention because you were the principal, or was it easier for them, or was it harder for them?
Well, by the time I was principal, our older daughter was not even, she was past middle school. So there's 3 different campuses. So she was at the high school campus. My middle school daughter, I was not the principal yet. I was I ran the front area. So receptionist and that kind of stuff. So no, by the time I was principal, she was at the high school as well.
Nice. Okay.
And even if they were, I was big on with the teachers and everything. We do not give special recognition. It's got to be an even playing field. The kids are very wise. They know. So I was pretty strict about that. So no one felt like anyone was getting special attention.
Knowing you, that doesn't really surprise me. That makes sense. I thought it would be super interesting to bring you on. I think most of the community knows who your husband is. And when I said like a beloved member of the community, the low carbohydrate community, I really mean that. Like people know him, they recognize him, they follow the LowCarbMD podcast, and just his spirit is it transcends almost the message even. And we just really love him. And we got the opportunity to sit down, you and I, and just get a little bit of the backstory. I got to meet you for the first time. I met Brian for the first time, I believe, in Keto Salt Lake 2022, and have, come across him several times. And always appreciated his content. But you also have an amazing story about, supporting him through this. And your life obviously changed through this, crazy journey that you've been on. So I definitely want to talk about that. But before we do, I've been asking everybody who I came across and have interviewed since the Symposium for Metabolic Health in San Diego, what did you think? What were some standout moments? How did you find the conference?
I love the conference every year. It is one of my favorite things to do. I love, and most of the time, well, I do volunteer, doing stuff, but most of the time I'm not naturally in the community, right? It's not something that I do. I live it through Brian. I'm super supportive. I love it. I believe in it. I walk it out in my own life, but I am not, if people were to throw names around, now Georgia Ede, of course, I know who that is, and she was one of my highlights. But if, so I just sit and I listen and I take in and I learn a lot. I'm one of those people that are in the audience saying, "Oh," and then I'm asking Brian, "What does that even mean?" And people, it's kind of like they assume, I think, that I am in the, you know, I understand and I know everything about metabolic health because Brian has his 2 podcasts. He's a physician and that's what he specializes in. But my favorite thing to do is support him in anything that he wants to do or he feels called to do. But I don't, my mission is not to know everything. So I'm always learning. I love the community there. It is like no other that I've experienced. Now, I haven't been to a lot of other places. So to be fair, I don't have anything to compare it to, but I'm telling you, when I am there, I just see everybody welcome. All the speakers are easy to approach. They sit at the dinners and just talk to everybody. They're just normal, down to earth human beings. And I think that is so important because I believe many of those speakers that are there, they just are human and people are so in awe by them. So I think it's really healthy for people to see them just as normal human beings and
Sure.
very approachable,
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely are. I often wonder about the people who do like the audio visual at these conferences. Like they have to work, they're there. I wonder what they think about some of this stuff because again, they're not there to learn about keto, low carb, that kind of thing. But obviously they're paying attention to the audio and visual. And as outsiders, I often wonder, like, what do they take anything from this, or do they think we're like this kooky kind of cult? And you're not necessarily an outsider, and so, but also, like you said, you're not like the flag bearer of the community either. Does it seem to you at all like cultish or anything? Like when we're
No,
there, like learning it, do you get that vibe at all?
no,
Okay.
no, but I also live the lifestyle. So I'm all in.
Yeah.
I know it's affected me personally, this lifestyle. So I know I'm always excited to learn more. So no, not cultish at all. I often think about that's something I was thinking about too, the people that are behind the scenes and they're just doing their job and they're good at it. I did watch them. I'm like an observer. It's like one of my favorite things to do anywhere we go. Sometimes Brian will go, "Hey, hello, I'm over here." I'm like, "Oh, I can tell you all about that. This is their first date." That's the type
I
of
love
person.
it. I
So
love
I
it.
observe, and I also was observing, and they seem to just be having a great time and enjoying. And when they were working, they were in tune because they have to be. They have to be paying attention to what they're doing. And so I'm sure they took it in. And you can't. I mean, especially when you look at. It's one thing if someone's just saying their opinion, but when you're looking at all the studies and the stats and the facts, it's hard to not, I mean,
Sure.
you'd have it's overwhelming sometimes with how much information is out there
Yeah.
and truth, you know.
That's a really good point. I also wonder if they pick up a difference in the energy. Like I've argued that like regardless of whatever topic we're talking about, it could be, a grocery list or paint chips or whatever. Like it doesn't matter. Like when you get that many people in this lifestyle, ketogenic, in the same room, I notice just this super high energy vibe. And I wonder if like again, like Saturday in the afternoon, after we've been there for 3 days and very technical presentations, and you look around in the audience and everybody's paying attention, nobody's nodding off and sleeping, like everybody's like fully in, nobody went to the beach, you know what I mean, like
No.
everybody's there to be there. I wonder if they pick up on that as well,
Yeah.
just the energy of everybody like
Yeah,
feeling
I'm
so
sure.
good and healing
I don't know
all
how you
together.
can't.
I agree.
And one of my other highlights is everyone is in a different place in their journey, and it's so welcome there.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get a sense or a vibe at all that there is any judging or criticism. It's everyone is welcome. And one of my favorite things is, there was someone I was sitting next to, and were on their journey. You don't know, you just know they're in part of their journey. You don't even, but they have a story. So I love to just sit and ask people, hey, what is your story? You're here. Tell me, and it's cool that everyone is on a different, no one's arrived, and no
Yeah.
one ever does arrive, but you don't get that sense like, anybody's arrived yet. You all feel like you have a place to be, you
Yeah.
belong. And I
Yeah.
love that.
That's such a great point. I made that mistake specifically in Low Carb Denver 2023. In preparation for that conference that I was going to, I put out a podcast link that anybody that was attending that show could sign up to schedule during a break a 15-minute quick chat interview. And I compiled them all into one big episode and just said, here's a random sampling of people who are at this conference. Why are they here? How did they learn about low carb, whatever? And one dude signs up. I'm looking at the dude and I'm like, he's clearly like not exactly following low carb. He's 61. He's overweight and doesn't look, great. He sits down and the first thing he says is, my name's Mike. I'm 61. I had a heart attack last year. I found the work of Dr. Ken Berry. I've lost 80 pounds. I've still got 60 to go. I'm feeling great. And I think to myself, like my first instinct is to judge. And you realize like he's on his journey. We're all on the journey,
Yeah.
like you said. Like, I don't know if you got to talk to Jules. He also kind of a bigger
Oh
dude, and
yeah.
he's on his weight loss journey. He's like reversed his bipolar,
Oh
and he's
yeah.
asking great questions. And
Unbelievable.
oh,
He was
so
one of
cool,
the people
great
I had
guy.
such a great time talking to.
It's
Yeah.
awesome.
Talk
Yeah,
about a story that is worth telling and listening to,
yeah.
I was very impressed by him and just his journey.
That's amazing. And it's so awesome that you credited that conference in particular. 2023 was the first time I went to the symposium, and Doug at these conferences always offers like if you sign up for this conference
Yeah.
next year right now, you'll get a discount. And it was no hesitation, just
Yeah.
swipe the card. I'm coming back next year. Like it's so great. It's great to see everybody and feel that energy. And it was obviously awesome to meet you there. And let's
Thank you.
hear about your story. Tell us how you and Brian first met. And it definitely sounds like it was love at first sight, but I'll let you tell the story and you can say whether that was true or not.
Well, it was for me. I was a sophomore in high school, and he was a freshman, and he was this cute little boy that walked onto campus, and he definitely, I mean, he had weight on him, he's always struggled with his weight, always. His family has obesity. It's just always always had a struggle. But I just looked at how he would treat people, and we never were in the same friend group. But when I saw him and his smile and his dimples and his sweetness, I always thought maybe I should, in high school. Okay, we're talking high school. So in that era, in that season, you're like, maybe I should change friends groups. Maybe I should do whatever I can to get closer, because he didn't know who I was. And I was in theater and drama and choir, and he was more, he was a jock. He played football and wrestling and stuff. So I didn't tell anybody. It was just kind of my own little secret. And then my junior year, in his sophomore year. So now for all summer long, he's been at football practice and cutting weight. And so he walks on campus. And I mean, I honestly, right now, just talking about it, I have chills. I just remember thinking, holy cow, he's changed. Still had no idea who I was. And it wasn't until, it's so silly now that I think back, but I mean, he always had he never really had girlfriends until senior year, my senior year, his junior year. I did it. I jumped ship. I joined the cheerleading squad so that I could
I was
be
wondering.
at all the games. And I just realized, nothing against them. It just my personality, their personality. I just didn't enjoy cheerleading as much. Yeah, the dancing part, because that was my thing, but it was really, gossipy, and you didn't know who you could trust. And so he started dating the cheerleading, like one of the cheerleaders who was my friend. And so I thought, oh man. And then it wasn't until middle of senior year that I knew that there's a girl, if you tell her something, the whole school will know before you even finish your sentence. One of those, we all have them in
Seriously.
high school. So on
Seriously.
purpose, I was in her class on purpose. I told her so that he would find out. It's so funny because I'm just not that type of person, but I did, and she told him. And so that's kind of where he found out his relationship with the cheerleader was fading, and he kind of found out. So it wasn't until I was a senior and he was a junior that but now I find out he definitely knew who I was, but he didn't know me. And so we just kind of started talking and becoming friends, and it evolved from there.
I
Yeah.
love it. What a
And
lovely story. That's
I
great.
know, I know.
Hey, it's love. Like when you know, you know. Like when I was single, I wasn't looking for any kind of relationship. I had a marriage that ended, and I was divorced, and I didn't want to get into another relationship. And I met
Hmm.
Bethany, and it was a very short period of time that we were dating, that we were then engaged. And like once you know, it's
You
like the
know.
line from When Harry Met Sally. Like when you know that you want the rest of your life to start right now, or whatever the line
Yeah.
is that I
Yeah.
just butchered. But yeah, that's awesome. Now, most doctors, this is a bit cliche, but most doctors say that they get into what being a doctor, they get into that because they want to help people. And I think by and large, that's probably true. There's probably exceptions, but I don't know if there's anybody that would more prove that to be true than your husband. Would you say
Hmm.
that's correct?
Absolutely. I remember, honestly, in high school, we had this hill that we would sit on the grass and just talk. And I remember then him saying, now it wasn't exactly, he wasn't doing what he's doing now, but he wanted to be either sports medicine physician, oncology physician. He didn't know exactly where, but he knew that he wanted to go into this profession because that's just who he is. He wants to help people. That's just his identity. It's who he is.
Mm,
So, and he's always doing that. Sometimes, I mean, he's had to grow in learning and boundaries because he has such a heart for it. His tendency is anybody that needs or questions or has anything, he's there. And so he's had to kind of learn boundaries in that, but that is his heart.
yeah,
And I know we're going to talk about the journey of him switching over, but that's partly why he, was he got into a place where he was not happy anymore in what
yeah.
he was doing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. What was the journey like in med school? That must have been challenging. Again, from your perspective, as you're
Yeah.
watching him go through this, how was that journey through the
Well,
schooling part?
yeah, that's a great question. He went to USC. So we met in Huntington Beach, Fountain Valley, California. Then we got married, went to med school in LA, where USC is, and then eventually ended up in San Diego for worked, where he ultimately started his practice. But um, in med school, we were warned. I mean, we had people that were physicians, and they told us, we asked, give us some wisdom, and they just said, it's going to be hard. You're going to have to, and specifically for me, you're going to have to just be patient with him and not need to be his focus of attention, because it's not an easy journey. And I don't know if it was my personality, maybe combined with the wisdom that I got. So sometimes we have an expectation and we get let down. Maybe it was an unrealistic expectation. I think I had realistic expectations of what to expect. And also my personality too, probably a combination, but I mean, and I did work, I supported him through it. So as soon as I graduated from college, I went right into working with, mostly middle school, but high school teenagers, abused kiddos, in a facility. And so I worked and supported him, and he had a lot of loans as well, because it's just expensive. And I just was able to support him. And I'm not saying that's any great thing about me. I think my expectation was, this is going to be hard. He's going to have, back then that you would do rotations, they'd keep you up 48 hours. I mean, it's illegal now, but it wasn't then.
Yeah.
So he would come home after being awake for 2 days, maybe 5-minute cat naps, and just made sure that there was dinner on the table, and that he had, that he knew it was okay to just go to bed. And I just had the right expectation. I was grateful for that expectation, and the ability just to let it be and know that this is short term. And his personality too, we had great communication. And so, we were always talking. His personality is, I'm only going to do this once, and I'm going to do it right. So, I'm going to have to be in the books sometimes. And, we won't be able to have special time or dates or whatever. And we just expected it, knew it, and walked through it. And my job was, that I gave myself, was to support him. I was all in as much as I could to make it easier for him.
Well, that's incredible that you had that attitude. I still think it would be incredibly challenging to feel like the best of him had to be dedicated to something else temporarily in like the prime of your lives, and like with everything you probably would have liked to do, and vacations and dates and all that stuff. So I think it's amazing that you were able to support him in that way during that difficult journey. And I'm guessing too that when that stage of the journey was done and he was actually starting to practice, it was probably similar to my first manager when I started personal training, where they called me bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Was he pretty excited to finally get to be able to practice?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. I mean, he was up at the crack of dawn. He worked about 30 minutes from our house, if you like traffic and all of that. He'd be up at the crack of dawn, go into the office. He got pretty fortunate right out of residency. He did 5 years because he was chief resident for his 5th year. And then he got into one of the most well-known practices in San Diego. So he was just starstruck. He was excited. He was all in, full of life, no problem, getting up, going. He could not wait to do what, his dream was. It was a dream job, and still is for him.
Yeah. Well, how long did that excitement kind of last, given the reality of the job and what he was actually noticing practicing?
I don't know if I could put a year on it. I mean, he was at that practice for about 18 years, I think 19 years. And, you're in it. There's such a honeymoon stage. And he was he was this rookie coming in with all of these veterans just walking alongside of him, because there was 5 doctors in the practice and everyone was farther along than him. And he just put both feet forward and just, did whatever he could to help people. Now, mind you, he was not in the metabolic health mindset back then.
Exactly. Yeah.
He was doing what he was taught in medical school. And I think that was also his mind he's a smart guy, and he thinks differently. He critically thinks. So he questions things, which I love, because he was with his patients. Him and I would have conversations. He would come home and things like this through the years before he got into the metabolic before the light bulb kind of turned on, like, he would, even in medical school, he would ask his professors questions like this, that just didn't make sense to him. And for example, okay, if, for like the ADA diet for a diabetic, if we have to pump them with this many units of insulin if they eat French fries or ice cream because it raises their blood sugar, then why don't we just encourage them not to eat those foods and we wouldn't have to, pump them with insulin? And they would just, give him answers that didn't make sense. Well, that's not realistic. Patients aren't going to do that. We just have to, that's diabetes has been around forever. This is just a disease. This is how we fix it. This is how we control it. And it just, those kind of things he always wrestled with. That's just one of many, but those are just the kind of things he always wrestled with, and it just didn't make sense. So he never felt great about giving a diabetic patient insulin or having to put them on it, or, he always felt like he had to recommend the ADA diet, and it's not even something he believed in. It really
Wow.
became this internal struggle so I don't know about when, to answer your question. I just know there was a point in time where maybe it was 10 years in or something. So he continued on for many, many years, because you don't know what you don't know
Right.
until and he just, it's like the person who he was, there was something, he was just a different Brian. He didn't get excited anymore to go to work. He felt so bombarded with, then they just started changing how long you could see a patient. And his way of engaging with patients was, getting to know who they are first, so that he can say, maybe you don't need medicine. Maybe your job is just a little bit too stressful, or your marriage. Maybe we can start looking at how we can work, how you can start loving your spouse better, or, stuff like that. Um, and yet they were taking that ability for him to know the patient away. And
Mm.
he literally didn't even, it got to a point where his patient was coming in and he didn't even really know them. He just knew what their, lab results said, and then put them on, a statin or a med or whatever. And he just wasn't buying into it. So that's when he started taking his deep dive. Because I just said, if you don't like what you're doing anymore, because that's who I am. It's not that if you don't like what you're doing, just stop. It's if it's not, if your initial drive and dream and love for what you're doing is gone, figure out why, go in a different direction, or maybe consider doing something else. And so he really started on this deep dive, and started understanding metabolic health, and his questions were finally being answered satisfactory. He's like, I saw this way, 18 years ago, 19 years ago in med school. These were the questions I was asking. And it's now starting to make sense to him. So, I mean, I'm telling you, Casey, he would come home and I just allowed him to talk, because it's almost like he was learning a completely different language. Have you ever been with someone that's either doing a diet or they've come off of a cruise? They want everybody in the world to know this and do it and understand it. And that's where he was at. There was all of a sudden this yearning to learn more, to grow, and so I think he realized after a while his partners weren't on the same page with him anymore. They were discouraging him from spending, because I don't know, how much I should say about this, but these days Not that this is a bad thing, but it's just the truth. If you don't have all the boxes checked off of the questions you've asked patients, you know, they don't pay you. And yeah, so he didn't care. He's like, I won't check off any boxes. I don't care. At this point in time, what I know now, I'm failing the patient if I don't, because I know this to be true. This all makes sense. Why were we not taught this? And then he just started seeing there's something not okay. There's something wrong. And I can't unsee now what I've seen. I can't unlearn what I've learned. And he just started letting patients know, his diabetic patients and stuff. I taught you what I learned, and this is not the truth. The truth is, I can help you metabolically. I can probably help you possibly even reverse or not take as much insulin. I could help you if you're in. And it just simply was taking him too long in the atmosphere he was at the practice he was at. And he was getting heat for it from his other partners. And they weren't on board. They kind of thought he was a little cuckoo. Um, and and so it came a time where he just said, I might need to leave the practice. And I was like, yeah, I'm all in. What do you want to do? You know, what do you do from here? And so it was a journey from that first conversation to when he finally did. I don't know. It's kind of foggy to me, but it seems like it was a couple of years that he was learning and understanding and trying really hard to do what he knows with his patients at his practice, until he finally got to a place where he's like, I've got to, maybe it means I just start my own practice. And I said, then let's do it. Let's plan financially, because money has never been a god to us. We live a very, very simple life. Years ago in that practice, we had an embezzlement by his office manager and lost. I mean, when I say lost everything, that's dramatic, but I mean, it was a huge, huge hit. And so we basically, as a family, just cut down on everything. We just didn't, the kids, you know, they were at an age where they didn't understand. And they were never really materialistic, because we aren't. And so they grew up in a very practical home, where if you need something, then, and we can afford it, then we get it. And they never saw us having a lot of money, because we were not frugal, but we were very simple. And so I just told them, we've done it before. You know, we cut out cable, we cut out everything when that happened. I mean, we had quality time as our gift at Christmas time. I mean, that was just reality. And so our kids had walked through that. We walked through that. I said, we've done it before. And when we weren't expecting it, because that embezzlement was a huge shock. And I said, so now that we know what you want to do and what your plan is and what you feel like, you know, he was really praying too, like asking the Lord, is this wise? What, you know, for wisdom and direction. And he felt like he was getting it, like he was getting answers. He was hearing from the Lord. He knew what he needed to do. And I think he was just fearful for a while. But in that season of not jumping ship yet and really just kind of like, oh my gosh, I think I know what I need to do, but I'm scared. It allowed me, I'm a budget girl. I know how to, I just started stowing money away. And because if it meant, you know, when he left the practice and he started his own, that we were going to be in the red for a while, I wanted to make sure that we could at least have our necessities covered. And so in that season of him being fearful, and then just finally, I just said, you just got to do it. I think he came back from a conference. I don't know which one it was. And he had hours and hours and hours. It was overwhelming of phone calls that he had to call back, labs he had to review. It took him a couple of weeks to catch up because he comes back and now he's seeing his patients, tons and tons of patients every single day. So then in between or at night, he had to focus on, the backlog of when he was gone. And I think it came to just one day of him just feeling completely defeated and us having a serious conversation of, honey, I don't even have my Brian anymore. You are so unhappy. You're so stressed out. And now different. This was a couple years, different. So you're either a hypocrite, or you're stuck and you can't get out. You feel like there's no getting out of it. And I know you're not a hypocrite because I know you. You're stuck. You feel stuck and you're not. Give yourself permission. Just be bold and courageous. Let's start getting a plan in place. And that's what he did. And he kind of was flying by the seat of his pants, but he was fortunate to find, a brick and mortar, a place where he could practice, and an amazing, beautiful, good friend of ours for years as his office manager saying, I'm in. And he called me one day and I was just like, let's do this. I was so excited. And he was too, but he was nervous. And he called me one day and he goes, I think I just resigned. And I was like, oh, it was January because we had gone away as a family in December and him and I were on a walk. And he said, I think I'm ready. I don't know when the door is going to open, but I'm going to wait for God to open that door. And I promise you that I'm going to walk through that door and let them know that I'll be leaving. And I think it was wise. He said, I'll give him 6 months. So it gave us time, as well, because when he called and said, I think I just resigned. And I'm like, what happened? And he said, well, the senior physician that was in there came in and was talking to me about something, and I could not fall in agreement and alignment with him. And we didn't get into a disagreement, but we were in a very strong agree to disagree. And he just basically, not verbatim, but something like this: if that isn't something that you're in line with, like, it had to do with the way Brian was practicing and the way all other 4 doctors were practicing. If that is not something that you're in line with, then maybe this isn't the right practice for you. And Brian's like, wow. That was the door. I knew it in the moment that if I let this door close, that I didn't know when the next one was going to open. So he said, I just told him, okay, well then maybe I should give my notice and look for something to do something else. And so it was January and he told him by June 1st, I'll be out. Wow. And then the next day he came back to Brian. He's like, well, I think we should have another discussion. And Brian said, no, actually I went home and my wife and I talked and we're both in agreement with this. So, you're right. I'm just not in alignment with this practice anymore. You guys it's not good or bad. It's just is. It's a reality. And I need to be true to myself and my patients. And so over the next 6 months, I just budgeted like crazy. And he went for it. He found his office manager. He found a place where he could rent space. And in June 1st, he was out. Now, mind you, this was 2020. So we all know what happened in 2020. Did something January.
Something happened in 2020?
This was January when he gave his notice. No. And then, I know March 15th or March 16th, because being a principal, it hit the school too. So in March, 2 months in of him, strategizing and planning, COVID hit. So we're both looking at each other like, oh. And it was the best thing that ever happened, because as you know, that most things went kind of telemedicine at that point in time. And we just, to this day, we look back and Brian said, yeah, I should have been obedient before that, to what I knew the Lord was calling me to do. it took me a while to get on board, but once I did, I'm so grateful I did it before that hit, because just God knew what he was doing. And my flesh would have been so scared and nervous, or thinking, oh, let me give it more time. And we just didn't have a choice at that point. And we still look back and think best thing that ever happened to us was, and this isn't, again, great doctors that work there, so nothing against them, but him leaving, I have my husband back, and I lost him for a while as far as his joy and compassion. And so it's just fun every single day of his life, of our lives. He's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing and what he was called to do. And I think back to that grassy hill in high school that we talked, and his heart and his eyes light up when he said, I want to help people. And then, go walking through this season of feeling like he's not making a difference because he's stuck, to now knowing he is. And I keep going, please don't start a third podcast. Like, because as you know, podcasts they're not in a bad way, but they're time consuming, and they take a lot of effort and thoughtfulness and time. And when Brian's the type, if he's interviewing someone, he's reading their book, or he's going to research them so that it can be a very fruitful podcast. And, the man is doing what he was born to do. And I often look back and think he's a different person. Not only has he come alive in medicine and he loves it, but the Brian that I knew 15 or 20 years ago was at a party in a corner trying to eyeball me, pointing to his watch and like going like this. Like he wasn't social. It wasn't that he was rude. He wasn't shy. He just wasn't a big social, like, come in, come out. If you really want me to go with you, I'll go with you. So this transition he's like newborn. He has come alive in so many ways. And I love watching him feel like he's making a difference, and know that he cannot change the world, but that's why he started the podcast in the first place, especially the first one with Tro, LowCarbMD, because he's like, I only see one patient at a time, but if I do this, then thousands of people. Back then, it was hundreds of people. He would say, I think if we can get a couple hundred people to listen, then I'm changing 100, 200 people, I'm helping them, and not just the one patient in front of me. So where it's become now, it's just, he's just, I love
tens of millions have heard those episodes.
Yes. It's awesome. It's awesome.
I love that story from your perspective. That is amazing. And it's so interesting to contemplate. Like, if the pandemic hadn't happened, my wife and I would not have been placed on unemployment. We would not have started our own company. Like, it's such an interesting event that happened with all the misfortune and terribleness that happened from that. It was also an opportunity. We would not be having this conversation today if it wasn't for the pandemic, of all things. It's nuts. Wow. So, okay, we heard his kind of story with health as well, and how, it's kind of the traditional thing. You're so busy, you're gaining a bit of weight, a little bit more every year. And you find the new information that if the doctor's willing to open himself up and ask those questions, like you mentioned. I'm curious about you. What was your kind of health like when you were, just on the precipice of learning about low carbohydrate diets and metabolic health?
So I don't have a big story there. I do have a little story, but and I'll share that in a minute. But I honestly, when Brian learned about this and started educating me, and we started experimenting with it, I did it. I love eating this way. This is the way we love to eat this way. So it didn't ever feel like it was a diet for me, but because I love the man I'm married to so much. Sorry. Oh my gosh, I don't even know why I'm getting emotional about this. It's such a good thing, but I just thought I will do anything for him, because he's struggled all of his life. This is not an adult issue for him. He's always struggled. And and never been able to beat this. He was never diabetic. He never got to that point, thank goodness, because he found out soon enough that now we've, the whole trajectory of our lives are different. But I've always watched him struggle, and he's so beautiful to me on the inside and the outside, but I've watched his self-esteem be affected. And then now he's telling people about metabolic health and he's still struggling, So I was all in for him. But what I noticed, I always struggled with irritable bowel syndrome. And the doctors never really could give me anything that would cure it or fix it or help it. And even the things that I would eat, would help it a little bit, but I didn't really know exactly how to control it from the information I was being given from my doctor. And so I just realized after a certain point, I haven't had any issues at all. And so it just was one of those things that I wasn't even paying attention to. But I've never, I mean, we've for years, for like 15, 20 years, we've been doing some sort of low carb, and not because Brian knew why or what was happening to the body or the blood sugar. He wasn't aware of all of that then, but we did know it worked for us and we enjoyed eating that way. So, the answers kind of came later, and even the direction of how we're eating came later. But I just noticed I'm not having any issues. So for me, I don't have this. I never really struggled weight wise until I was premenopause. And then that's when you say the next year 5 pounds and the next year another 5 pounds, I just felt like I've never in my life had issues with my weight. I've always exercised for many years. We've eaten healthy. I really tried. And when I say healthy, it was what you think is healthy, right? But there was always an effort there, whether it was low fat or, what have you. I always gave an effort to eat healthy. So I really didn't struggle until premenopause. And then I just started getting weight in areas that I never, ever, it didn't make sense to me because I wasn't really eating any different. Especially premenopause. I'm 55 now, and this started probably around 50. So Brian's already just starting his new practice. You know what I mean? About that time, 5 years ago. So I'm very aware, and we are eating very clean, and I'm exercising, and I have no idea what's happening to my body. So wow. I really didn't struggle until then, and then went through menopause. And for me, I don't know. Do you discourage saying a name of what helps us? Yeah.
Not at all. No.
I don't know if Mindy Pels.
She's amazing.
Yeah, Fast Like a Girl. I came across her. I really don't do any social media, but I do a little bit of Instagram. I post my kids' birthdays. Nothing. Again, I live a very exciting, boring life. Nothing very exciting. But when I went on Instagram, she just came across, and I thought, Brian and I have talked a lot about why stuff works sometimes for men and it doesn't for women, or it does for women and it doesn't for men. And in his educating me, recognizing the hormones are different, going through menopause is different. And I fell across Mindy Pels. He had never heard of her at the time. And I said, hey, I think I want to do this. I have nothing to lose. She's doing a 3-day, water fast, and then a 30-day reset. I'm going to get her book. I'm going to give it a shot. And he encouraged me to do it. And I did it. And that was the beginning of a life change for me, as far as that menopause, estrogen, like the belly, that all of that I was getting. So I don't have a great story with that, other than the irritable bowel syndrome naturally just healed, and then me making awareness of it. And then really her book was life-changing for me.
Well,
Yeah.
we definitely encourage name drops like that because now I'm going to be able to write to Dr. Mindy Pels and tell her that she owes us a 20% commission now. Every time somebody buys the book, it's because they heard it here at Boundless Body Radio and it pays our bills. So that's great. I just actually, it's funny you mentioned irritable bowel syndrome. I just heard an author say when they give the diagnosis of irritable bowel syndrome, it's basically the diagnosis of we have no idea.
Yeah.
It's just like this grab all,
Yeah.
your stomach hurts. That's a bummer. And I think that's a wonderful story. You hear that all
Yeah.
the time in this community. Like the weight loss and the fat loss is such it's the side thing.
It
And
is.
it's the people that like realize suddenly, like, wait a second, why have I not gotten an athlete's foot? Or why does my knee not hurt anymore? My knee always used to hurt, or all of these things. And it's
Mhm.
just like an afterthought. Like, why haven't I had an eczema flare in like
Mhm.
6 months? That's weird.
Mhm.
And you almost like it's like the afterthought. And irritable bowel, that's a significant change. So I
Oh
do think
yeah.
that's a pretty amazing story. I'm curious now that you've been in the community, you've been in these conferences, what are your priorities now as far as like continuing to eat this way? Like when you go to these conferences, you learn all these different things that people are talking about, surprisingly little about weight loss and obesity. Like it's
Oh yeah.
mentioned, but it's not the main thing at all. It's like
No.
the side
Mental
thing.
health, that whole first day was
Incredible.
mm,
Yeah, incredible. So yeah,
yeah.
what are your main motivators now to continue eating this way?
I want to be honestly my why. My why is always different. I will say that in order, not that I have to have something to keep me on track, because this really is my life. I mean, it's again, I don't look at it as a diet or something I have to strive for or fight for, because you know what? If we want to go to, and we don't often, but if we want it, because I love to cook, but if we want to go to a Mexican restaurant, we're going to have some chips and salsa. But we just ask them, hey, can you just bring like 20 chips? Don't bring a whole bowl. Just bring like 20 chips, a bunch of, salsa. And if they have, celery or carrots, we'll have them do that. But we just like, we're okay with that because we just don't ever eat that way. So I don't need something to keep me motivated, but I do believe in your why, because I think your why really does keep you on track. And if your why is significant enough, so not a like my why was going on the metabolic health cruise. And so my why was I didn't need to lose 20 or 30 pounds to go on the cruise because I'm at a weight that I'm fine with now. But I want to be in, a bathing suit, and I've had two babies, so I have some stretch marks, and all of that is all good. But my why is I want to be stronger. I want to build, some of the muscle in my thighs. I want to eat the foods that are gonna move me in that direction better. So, that was my why. My why these days is my girls, one of our girls is married, and there's going to be babies coming along. My other one's getting married, our other one's getting married, and I want to be a strong, healthy grandma. I was at a place where when I had that extra, so I've lost probably 40 pounds in the
Wow.
last 5 years.
Wow.
And it's not because of eating different. Yeah, I switch around what we eat, but not to the degree that, I mean, it's maybe more salmon than steak, or more steak than, I mean, it's little changes like that, like proteins and stuff. And, but honestly, the fasting, the Mindy Pell's Fast Like a Girl, the fasting is what really helped me. But I've lost 40 pounds. So I recognize if I stop my fasting regimen, it affects me. So I know how to keep the 40 pounds off. And now I want to make those 40 pounds muscle and lean. So I want to be able to, there was a time, Casey, 5 years ago, as healthy as we eat and all of that, but with the extra 40 pounds that I couldn't explain at all, it would be hard for me to get into a sitting position and get up without using my hands, without holding on to something and pulling me up. And I felt like I was 30, 15, 20, 30 years older than I really was.
Wow.
So that is my why. So I now have this rule of thumb that, if I am too tired, okay, do it anyways. Just do it anyways, because I want to be able to get now. I don't ever use anything to stand up. That's kind of one of my rules. If I'm going to get down in that position, I'm going to stand up without any tools, just my own strength. And if I can't, and I feel like, oh, that's a core issue, I'm going to start working on that core. So I just really, my why is I want to be a strong, healthy grandparent. I want to be able to have fun, and I want longevity. And I know that just eating healthy is not going to bring me the full picture of longevity. I've got to keep up with, lifting a little weights and just being strong and working on, keeping that muscle tone, especially at my age. So I don't know if that exactly answered your question, but I think your why and what you do to get to your why might be different depending on the why in each season,
Yeah. Yeah, that's so well said. I think it's so funny that you say, yeah, I don't really have this big story of health or anything. And then, like, as a side note, you just chuck in, like, oh, I lost 40 pounds and kept it off effortlessly. This may be like,
Okay, that is
that's
funny.
amazing.
That's funny. I think growing up, I never did until premenopause. And then all of a sudden it's like, I don't even know what to do with, like, because I never struggled,
Yeah.
and it certainly gave me a different mindset and compassion for, and it's just real when
Wow.
we're going through menopause and the hormones, it's just real.
Yeah.
And so I'm
That's
glad.
amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
When I grew up, as I was growing up, like my dad does sports for a local channel, so he's recognized around here locally. People know who he is. He's been doing it for 40 years. And he's used to being in front of people, and he would always like give presentations and stuff like that. My mom was definitely not that person, but when she was diagnosed with breast cancer before she passed away, they made her part of the race for the cure as like a chairperson. I remember her getting up and just like very simply the way my mom was, like in 1 minute, just said something that was like very much from the heart. And my dad and I both realized at the time, like, my dad gets all the attention, but it's my mom who has like this amazing, perfect, simple way of doing things. I look at the two of you kind of like that. Like, we all know Brian and love Brian, and he's the spokesperson. And there you are in the background with this incredible story. Just such a joy to chat with, and
Thank
to
you.
share this conversation that was completely from your heart. I think is just absolutely wonderful. I'm so
Thank
glad
you.
I was able to meet you. I'm so glad you agreed to do this, because I know it's not your favorite thing in the world. And
No.
you might have an interesting answer to our very final question, which is, where would you like people to go to find you and connect with you in your work? Maybe
I
the
really
phone book. I
don't
don't know.
have anywhere. I don't have anywhere for people to find me. And it's not because I'm so private, because I mean, what you see is what you get. I'm very open, but I just honestly, I'll say this then, because for your final question, I am Brian's office manager now here in Arizona at his Arizona Metabolic Health. So I spend my days just really supporting him in that way. And it's not my personality to do all of what you guys do. So I don't spend a lot of time on social media. I just kind of do things for me that I know are gonna bring me to a place of, so I'll just give some words of wisdom, maybe,
Perfect.
of why I'm the best, boring, funnest person in the world.
You're
I
the
just
best.
think staying, some of the ways that I live my life is I try my best to stay humble, to have a teachable spirit, and to recognize that I don't know everything. But I try to have this growth mindset throughout life where, that I I look at no's, and I didn't make this up. I heard it, but I live this way. I look at every no as a next opportunity, an NO, next opportunity, every failure as another chance to try again. So I'm just really big. I try to inspire people not to give up. We're always a work in progress, and I do my best in life to, people have said, well, what is your secret? And I'm like, I don't know. I just try to love well. I try to serve others well. I try to listen well. And I think if we can just think outside of ourselves sometimes and think of others, then I think we'll be someone that we like at the end of the day, So, you can't find any of that on social media, but here we go. There you
That's
go.
amazing.
That's my final.
Well, I certainly don't have anything to add to that. That was very, very well said. We'll tag all of Brian's stuff. So if anybody
Okay.
wants to reach out, they can find Arizona Metabolic Health. Lanell, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so
Thanks.
very much for joining us today and sharing your experience. It was absolutely wonderful. And I really,
Thank you,
really appreciate it.
Casey.
Thank you
Thank you,
so very
Casey. Have a
much.
great day.
You too.
All right.
And this has
Bye-bye.
been another episode of Boundless Body Radio. You would never know. I could make this up and completely lie to you. I could tell all of my guests this and you would never know, but that was one of my absolute favorite podcast episodes ever. We've done
Why? That is
over
crazy.
700.
Oh my gosh.
That was
Casey,
so,
thank you. Oh my
so
I'm
good.
cracking up.
Oh my gosh, that was
All right.
incredible.
Well, I'm glad.
You did
I was going to give you
amazing.
permission. You do not have to share this.
Oh my. I'm like bummed that it's not going to be released for a few weeks.